The next day, I usually wake up in some strange place with a kid with an accent playing with my feet.
For nearly 30 years, one simple couch became the most powerful place in America. Some stars walked onto it as unknown dreamers and left as household names. Others arrived with confidence but ended up creating moments they wished everyone would forget. And then there were the rare guests whose interviews became television history. Even today, people still replay these unforgettable nights. But what made Johnny Carson's stage so different? And why do only 7 guests stand above thousands of others? Before we begin, here's something to think about. If you could watch just one Johnny Carson interview live, which guest would you choose? Let me know in the comments. Long before social media, viral clips, or streaming platforms, there was one show every major celebrity hoped to appear on: The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson. From 1962 to 1992, Carson welcomed actors, musicians, athletes, politicians, and comedians into millions of American homes almost every weeknight. According to interviews with Carson, biographies like Johnny Carson by Henry Bushkin, and reports from trusted outlets including NBC and the New York Times, a great appearance on his show could transform a career almost overnight. But Carson's real talent wasn't just telling jokes. He had a rare gift for making people feel comfortable. Guests often arrived nervous, unsure of what would happen next. Within minutes, Carson's calm smile and quick humor helped them relax. That was when the magic began. Sometimes a guest shared a deeply personal story that no one expected. Sometimes an off-the-cuff joke had Carson laughing so hard he couldn't continue the interview. And every now and then, something happened that nobody, not even the producers, could have planned. Those unscripted moments became the heart of late-night television. Over nearly 3 decades, Carson interviewed more than 20,000 guests. Most appearances faded with time, but a small number became legendary, replayed for generations and remembered as some of the greatest moments in television history. And the first guest on our list didn't just entertain Johnny Carson. They completely changed the mood of the entire studio in a way nobody saw coming. The first guest on our list was not a movie star or a politician. He was a comedian whose energy was so wild that even Johnny Carson, a man famous for staying calm, could barely keep the show under control. That guest was Robin Williams. When Robin first walked onto The Tonight Show, the audience expected laughs. What they got was something much bigger. Within seconds, he was jumping from one voice to another, acting out funny characters, and firing off jokes so quickly that even Carson struggled to keep up. Instead of trying to slow him down, Carson did something brilliant. He stepped back and let Robin shine. That simple choice created television magic. People watching at home had never seen anything quite like it. Robin's mind seemed to move faster than anyone else's. One moment he was pretending to be a famous actor. The next, he was inventing a completely new character on the spot. His comedy felt unpredictable, but Carson always knew exactly when to laugh and when to let the moment breathe. Many television historians and interviews with Carson's producers have pointed to these appearances as perfect examples of why the show became so successful. Carson understood that the best television was often unscripted. He knew when to guide the conversation and when to simply enjoy the ride. But Robin Williams wasn't the only guest who could surprise him. Soon another comedian would arrive and create one of the funniest interviews Carson had ever experienced. Yet this next moment wasn't built on fast jokes. It came from something much simpler: pure laughter. That comedian was Don Rickles. Known as the Merchant of Venom, Rickles made a career by teasing everyone around him. No one was safe, not movie stars, athletes, politicians, or even Johnny Carson himself. Most hosts tried to stay in control when Rickles appeared. Carson did the opposite. He welcomed the chaos. The two shared a friendship that audiences could feel through the television screen. Rickles would throw playful insults at Carson, and Carson answered with perfectly timed smiles and clever comebacks. It never felt mean. It felt like 2 old friends enjoying every second together. One famous appearance became legendary after Rickles accidentally broke a cigarette box that belonged to Carson. Instead of pretending nothing had happened, the story became an ongoing joke between them. Carson even surprised Rickles by appearing on his show to tease him about it. creating one of late-night television's most memorable comedy moments. Their friendship reminded viewers that the funniest television often comes from real relationships, not rehearsed scripts. And that's what made Carson different from many interviewers. He didn't try to become the center of attention. He made his guests feel like they were the stars. That was his secret. But just when audiences believed Carson's stage was only about comedy, another guest proved that laughter wasn't the only emotion capable of stopping America in its tracks. An interview filled with honesty, heartbreak, and unexpected silence was about to remind everyone that even the biggest celebrities carried very human struggles. Before we reveal that unforgettable moment, make sure you subscribe. The next story uncovers one of the most emotional interviews ever seen on late-night television, and it's a side of Johnny Carson that many people have never seen. Because what happened next would show the world that sometimes the loudest television moments are the quietest ones of all. Until now, the stories had been filled with laughter. But Johnny Carson knew that the most unforgettable television didn't always come from jokes. Sometimes, one honest conversation could leave an entire studio completely silent. One guest proved that better than almost anyone else. That guest was Betty White. Long before she became known to younger audiences through reruns and social media, Betty White was already one of television's most beloved personalities. Whenever she joined Carson, viewers expected warmth, humor, and quick wit. She never disappointed. But what made her appearances special wasn't simply that she was funny. It was that she felt real. Carson rarely interrupted her stories. Instead, he listened carefully, allowing her natural charm to shine. She spoke about her career, her love of animals, and the ups and downs of life in Hollywood with a sincerity that made millions feel as if they were sitting in the room with her. According to interviews and television archives, Carson admired guests who didn't try too hard to impress the audience. Betty White was exactly that kind of guest. She didn't need dramatic stories or shocking headlines. Her kindness became the performance. And somehow that was enough. But Carson's couch was also home to guests who could turn a simple interview into complete chaos. No one did that better than Rodney Dangerfield. The moment Rodney walked onto the stage, the audience knew what was coming. "I don't get no respect." That famous line became his signature, but behind it was years of struggle. Rodney had spent decades trying to make people laugh before finally becoming a star later in life. Carson understood that journey because he had watched it happen. Their chemistry was effortless. Rodney delivered one hilarious line after another, barely pausing for the audience to catch its breath. Carson often leaned back in his chair, laughing so hard that tears filled his eyes. Those laughs weren't forced. They were genuine. Many comedians later admitted that making Johnny Carson laugh was one of the greatest compliments they could ever receive. If Carson laughed, audiences laughed with him. And for Rodney, those appearances helped turn him into one of America's biggest comedy stars. But perhaps the most emotional story belonged to a guest who arrived not with jokes, but with honesty. Elizabeth Taylor had lived a life filled with incredible success, unforgettable love stories, public heartbreak, and constant attention from the media. By the time she sat across from Carson, she had already become one of the world's biggest movie stars. Instead of focusing on gossip, Carson asked thoughtful questions. He gave Taylor the space to speak openly about her life, her challenges, and the pressure of living under the spotlight. Viewers saw a side of her that magazine headlines rarely showed. A woman trying to balance fame with a normal life. That interview reminded everyone why Carson was more than a comedian. He was one of television's greatest listeners. He knew that sometimes the strongest moment came after a pause, not after a punchline. And maybe that's why celebrities trusted him with stories they shared nowhere else. Many people watching today may be facing moments when they feel misunderstood or judged. These interviews remind us that even the world's biggest stars carried fears, doubts, and struggles just like everyone else. One difficult chapter never defines an entire life. But if these interviews revealed Hollywood's most human side, the next guests would reveal something very different. Because the biggest surprises on Johnny Carson's stage didn't come from comedians or movie stars alone. They came from moments that no producer could have planned, and that millions of viewers would never forget. By now, one thing had become clear. Johnny Carson wasn't simply interviewing famous people. He was capturing moments that could never happen the same way twice. And sometimes, those moments were so unexpected that even the studio audience didn't know how to react. One guest who mastered those unforgettable surprises was Steve Martin. Today, Steve Martin is known as one of the greatest comedians of all time. But in the early days of his career, he was something completely different. His comedy didn't follow the normal rules. He wore fake arrows through his head, played the banjo, danced across the stage, and delivered jokes that made no sense, until suddenly they made everyone laugh. When Steve appeared on The Tonight Show, Carson immediately understood that he was witnessing something new. Instead of questioning Steve's unusual style, Carson welcomed it. He laughed, joined the fun, and gave Steve the freedom to be himself. According to NBC archives and interviews with Martin, those appearances introduced him to millions of viewers who had never seen comedy like that before. Almost overnight, Steve Martin became one of America's hottest entertainers. But even that incredible success wasn't the most surprising moment Carson ever witnessed. That honor belongs to a guest whose name is still connected to one of the most famous interviews in late-night history. Joan Rivers. For years, Rivers was one of Johnny Carson's favorite guests. She appeared on the show dozens of times, and Carson personally helped her career grow. Many people even believed she would someday become his successor. Then everything changed. In 1986, Joan accepted an offer to host her own late-night show on the Fox network. According to Rivers' autobiography, interviews she gave later in life, and reports from the New York Times, she believed Carson would eventually understand her decision. He didn't. Carson felt deeply hurt that she had accepted the job without speaking to him first. Their friendship, built over years of laughter and trust, suddenly fell apart. The silence between them became almost as famous as their interviews. Joan Rivers was never invited back to The Tonight Show while Carson remained host. For millions of viewers, it was shocking. Two people who had once laughed together on national television now barely spoke at all. Neither interview nor comedy sketch could erase that heartbreak. It became one of the biggest stories in television history, showing that success sometimes comes with painful choices. And perhaps the saddest part was that the friendship never fully recovered before Carson's death. That chapter reminds us that fame can open incredible doors, but it can also close some forever. As Carson's career moved toward its final years, people began asking one emotional question. Who could possibly replace the king of late-night television? The answer would spark one of television's biggest debates, involving Jay Leno, David Letterman, and years of behind-the-scenes drama that changed late-night TV forever. But before we reveal how Johnny Carson's story truly ended, there's one final lesson that every viewer can take away from his remarkable journey. Because Carson's greatest gift was never the jokes. It was the people he helped shine.